Hello, everyone, and welcome to Arkansas Connections. Today, we are diving into facts, breaking down the different STIs, and empowering you with the knowledge you need to stay safe and informed. I am welcoming back my one of my favorite guests, Andrea Davis, who she is the Community Health Specialist Coordinator at EAC. Hello, Andrea. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. I'm good. How about you?
I am doing great. I'm excited to get into this topic because there's a lot of times people don't know anything about the STIs. We just know the stigma or the myths. So we're going to get into the facts so that people can stay informed and safe. And first off, let's talk about why is STI Awareness Week important and what message should it convey to the public?
The STI importance is sexually transmitted infections. They are infectious diseases that, if left untreated, can actually cause more harm than good. You're at risk for women are at risk for pelvic inflammatory disease and even infertility for both men and women. I think it's just an awareness and just knowing that uh, unprotected sexual activity can lead to infections and or pregnancy in some cases. Just informing you so you know you can make better choices and decide what's best for you.
Okay, so let's talk about the different STIs. Let's just start with gonorrhea. What are the facts that you think people should know about gonorrhea?
So gonorrhea is a bacterial STI. We use antibiotics to cure it. Gonorrhea has developed kind of a defense to some antibiotics, which, if that continues, it can become a scary issue. But as long as we are informed about it and we're trying to protect ourselves and we're taking the antibiotics properly, hopefully it won't ever come to that. But gonorrhea is a lot like chlamydia in the fact that a lot of people don't have symptoms. Um, Men, if they have symptoms, it's typically issues with urination like burning or pain, um, and sometimes discharge from the penis. But if you have a discharge, you definitely need to see a doctor and figure out what's going on. There's multitude of reasons other than STIs that could cause that. There could be infection in the epididymis and the prostate, but it's always good to get that checked out anytime. Now, for us ladies, typically with gonorrhea and chlamydia, there's usually no symptoms at all. Um, and that's just more than not. That's the case. Um, the deal is with women is if it's left untreated, causing further issues. Because if PID, pelvic inflammatory disease, is left untreated, you can have chronic pain for the rest of your life. So it's very important to get treatment if you think something is going on. So a lot of people, what I have them tell me is, hey, I think I got a urinary tract infection, but, I want to get STI testing. So we go ahead and test them. A lot of times they'll test reactive or positive for those tests. And then I tell them, get treatment. If those antibiotics aren't helping and you're still having issues, you may have another infection as well. And that's back to the doctor and see about that.
How long before you start seeing symptoms, or like how long can you go without having any kind of symptoms?
Um, Gonorrhea and chlamydia, again, they're a lot alike. So usually 7 to 10 days, you'll start having symptoms if you're going to have them. The longer you have the infection, though, the more likely of irritation and issue. Another thing about gonorrhea and chlamydia is I like to call them isolated infections, meaning that, say you only had oral sex. If we do a urine test, it's not going to pick up that you have gonorrhea and chlamydia in your throat. So, if you're worried about those things, like you participate in anal or oral sex, then you also want to get swabs in those areas if you feel like there's been some exposure. Now, the cool thing about it is if you take an antibiotic, it's going to cure it in any one of those three areas. But it's just always something you want to think about because I don't think people actually think about that part of it. But they're kind of one and the same, gonorrhea and chlamydia. So you can't talk about one without talking about the other,
Yeah.
just because they're so much alike, but they're just caused by two different microorganisms.
Well, and since we're talking about chlamydia too, it's called the silent infection because it's like the one that goes unnoticed the longest, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Chlamydia, the the thing about chlamydia is it's just like gonorrhea except it's a microorganism, but people tend to have less symptoms. And if they do, men, it's usually related to urinary stuff, but that's because the urethra is the same tract that the sperm come from. So it's going to be they're kind of hand in hand. Whereas women, that's also a little different as well. Just remember with chlamydia, keeping those isolated infections, like I call it. So, but again, usually, if you have either one of those, typically they just give the same antibiotic. It just depends, and you can actually have both of those infections at once, which would be the same as you could also have syphilis and or HIV. So that's just one of those things because they're all caused by something different.
And if you are HIV positive, it makes you like you're at a higher risk of getting an STI, correct?
Yes. Yes. Now, one cool thing about HIV treatment is that if you're actually undetectable, or that you versus you, your immune system actually is working very well. And so you aren't as likely to get an infection, but you still have a higher risk over somebody else who's not taking that type of medication. Um, but typically, if you are undetectable, you're going to have way better chances of not catching those kind of things. But they're just not um, as severe, I guess is the word I was looking for.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why it's very important to regularly get tested for not
Yes.
just HIV, but for all the STIs.
Yes. If you practice unprotected sex, whether it's the same partner or multiple partners, the a good rule of thumb is just every 3 months.
I
Um,
still think even if you're if you're on if you're on PrEP, you have to get tested every 3 months. So that's the best. That's the great thing because it's a reminder. But if you're not on PrEP, protection still, I'm very much get tested every 3 months, even if you're using protection, because condoms are 99% effective. But what if you don't use it right? Or what if it breaks? Or just, there's so many different things that could lead to it's just, to me, it's safer to get tested regularly.
and you're absolutely right. And the window period, which is the time frame from exposure to maybe it being detectable on test, they vary. But the rule of thumb is basically 90 days. So every 3 months get tested, and you don't have nothing to worry about. Um, and sometimes even when you're in a monogamous relationship, it's also good because you truly, unfortunately, don't know what the other person is doing.
Mhm.
um, the only reason you don't need testing is if you're celibate, and you don't share any toys, which you shouldn't do that anyway. But
Or
yeah,
needles if you're a
or
drug user.
needles. Yes, if you inject drugs, whether prescribed or illicit. Yes.
Yeah, because when we say inject drugs, or like people automatically just think the hardcore drugs, but sometimes money's tight nowadays, and people sometimes will share those insulin needles or needles for their diabetic medicine, and people don't
Or
think about all the other things you can.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, some people get hormone shots, testosterone
Mhm.
shots. Like yeah. Don't ever use needle.
Right. Well, we covered gonorrhea and chlamydia, so
Mhm.
let's talk about syphilis. Now, I know there are 4 different stages.
Yes. So syphilis, my term for syphilis is it's the granddaddy of all STIs. Um, Syphilis is 4 stages. It's got a different bacterium that causes it, and I can't say it, so I'm not going to try. But syphilis does come in 4 stages. The first stage is primary. That's usually indicated by a sore, um, and they call it a canker sore. And it's usually wherever you were exposed to the infection. So, um, if you were exposed in the vagina, then it's going to be inside the vagina. It could be in the throat, it could be in the rectum, it could be on the outside around the anus. I mean, it could be on a labia. I mean, who knows, right? So, they'll these sores usually will last just like 7 days or so, and they will go away on their own. Um, Now, depending on the area, um, like say it's in your throat, I mean, we're eating all the time, so the area is probably getting irritated.
Hmm.
That may bother you for a lot longer. Um, but if you go to the doctor, they'll test you for everything, but they might not test you for syphilis. So you've got to say, hey, I had some unprotected sex. Can we go ahead and do a syphilis test? If they didn't draw blood, they didn't do a syphilis test, or a finger stick. You have to have blood for syphilis. So if that heals on its own, it'll go to the next stage, which is secondary. Secondary is usually indicated with a rash, or a cluster of sores. The rash is usually on the hands, feet, and sometimes on the trunk. Um, if there's a rash that even contains the arms, then that's probably a secondary stage of syphilis that's actually been long term. So maybe you've been in the second stage for a year or two. Because I have seen that in like some homeless people that don't get regular medical care, they don't have access to it or whatever, and they tend to have a little bit more um, rashes or whatever related to it. Um, Now, if it's left untreated, it can go to the third stage, which is latent syphilis. Latent syphilis, there is no signs and symptoms. It kind of sits dormant in your system. It makes it less likely for you to be able to transmit it because you won't have sores. Because you have to come in contact with a syphilis sore in order to get syphilis. So it kind of is just hanging out in your system, but it may be sitting there dormant and then just kind of wake up and go into the tertiary stage 10, 30 years down the road. And with the tertiary stage, it's attacking your organ systems. Um, and if left untreated at that point, can actually cause death. One side effect of syphilis that's not talked about enough is neurosyphilis. You can actually get neurosyphilis at any stage of having syphilis. And this is usually some confusion. Some people will have a stroke or paralysis. Some of that can be reversible when treated, but some of it can't. We have famous people that have died from neurosyphilis, like Al Capone. He's probably the most famous person. But if you've ever looked up syphilis pictures on Google or something, there you'll see a picture of a black and white picture of a person and they have no nose. That's tertiary syphilis. Syphilis has been around for a very long time. It just wasn't treated until we found penicillin. Um, and some illegal ethics things happened in order for syphilis to get started, but it does work for syphilis. The biocillin is what they're prescribing right now. Um, Hopefully, we can continue to use that and we won't have any issues. But there's always a possibility of getting a super bug, so they say. But just do what the doctor says, get tested. Um, my biggest plug for STI testing is, ladies, if you see your gynecologist and you ask for STD testing, be specific because they will usually only test you what they think you need to be tested for. So, be specific. If they didn't draw blood, that means they didn't check for syphilis, they didn't check for HIV, they didn't check for herpes. So, always good to know that. So, Arkansas, unfortunately, The numbers came out for 2023, and we're fourth in the nation for syphilis cases. The other thing to mention with syphilis is congenital syphilis. So that's that vertical transmission from mother to baby. Now, you get plenty of STI testing if you're getting prenatal care. If you're not getting prenatal care, you're not getting that testing. That can that can detrimentally harm the baby or the infant or the fetus, excuse me. Um, so that's always a concern. The congenital numbers are still not as low as we want them because we don't want any. But so we've got to do a better job of that. The deal is just getting access to care, and it's really hard in this economy and whatnot to get care, and that can cause barriers. But anybody can reach out to EAC, whether you're pregnant or not, and we can do some testing, give you some peace of mind. We even have some safe sex kits that we can give you, tons of condoms, all kinds of stuff. So just always reach out to EAC. We can help.
And lastly, let's talk about trick. Now, I can't say the full term. I hope you can. It's a long word.
Trichomoniasis, and I probably didn't say it right,
Maniacal.
but that's okay.
Oh.
So trick is actually a parasite. You get it usually through sexual activity, but one thing with trick is it usually doesn't hang out on the hands or in the mouth, but it can be in the vagina, it can be in the penis, and obviously can be in the rectum, but it probably doesn't hang out there very long. But I don't know because I haven't studied that very much. But men and women can get trick. There is a specific antibiotic treatment for it that is curable. That antibiotic is a antibiotic they use for like GI infections, so it is a little different. It's called Flagyl. It can be really hard on the GI system, and no alcohol when you take it because you will be sick. They used to use it when people were trying to detox from alcohol. One thing about trick is you can get female to female transmission can occur with trick. That's usually the only one. Technically, with the if you share toys, there's always a possibility, except for HIV. When HIV hits air, it will die. So usually transmission with toys doesn't occur with HIV.
So, what are some of the most common misconceptions about STIs that you've encountered?
Um, it's usually to do with transmission.
Hmm.
Um, like so I didn't ejaculate, so there's no way I could have given it to her or him. Ejaculation doesn't have to occur with gonorrhea and chlamydia or trick for it to be passed on, or syphilis for that matter, because syphilis is distinct with that sore. You have to come in contact with that sore. That's why you usually can't transmit it during the latent stage. But that's usually, it usually has something to do with transmission. It's like with HIV. HIV is specific to certain body fluids. And so, like saliva, you can test for HIV, but you can't transmit HIV through saliva. There's not enough of the HIV in the saliva to actually cause infection in somebody else. And with HIV, it's really about the transmission as well, because you can still hug and kiss people and usually not transmit these things. Now, herpes you can transmit with kissing if you come in contact with somebody sore. So that's the other thing. But technically, with herpes, you don't have to come in contact with a sore. So that's just one of them things. Everybody gets tested before you start having sex, and then then you just clear the air. You're good,
Mhm.
and you don't have anything to worry about. Those viral things, they're usually not curable, with the exception of Hep C. Technically, Hep C is not an STI, but it is transmitted by blood. And so, if there's sex that involves a blood exchange there, it could happen. And then, as far as like prevention, I mean, with HIV, you have PrEP. Um, uh, you don't really have anything for the other ones except there is doxypep. Doxypep is usually only used like after a sexual assault, or if somebody's had anonymous sex with somebody. And it's usually like a episodic, so it's not something you continuously take. Um, and the research is leaning more towards it works best if it's the first time you've used it for an infection. As far as men, for women, it's not been effective for women. And that really has to do with our biology and the way the vagina works. So, which that also plays a part in HIV transmission.
All right. Well, how can individuals overcome the embarrassment or fear that may prevent them from getting tested for STIs or even talking to their partners about? Because that's one thing when you're in the moment, you don't just stop to think, oh,
Yeah,
well, have you been tested?
well, and I think that's why it's very important in a new relationship, or just in the initial conversations, when you're talking about other boundaries, or somebody mentions like, "Hey, can you send me a nude or something?" You start having those conversations up front. Hey,
Mhm.
so um, what kind of sex do you like? Like what positions, whatever. But also like, how many past partners have you had? Like, have you had unprotected sex multiple times? What type of sex do just all of that. Having those initial conversations and even going and getting tested together, it really helps take away that, oh, well, I didn't know kind of situation. But it's also a way of, these are my boundaries. This is what I will and will not accept, and just putting it out on the table. Because why are we not communicating? We have
And
all the way to communicate. Let's talk.
at the end of the day, you've got to protect yourself, and no one's going to
Mhm.
protect you better than you.
Right.
So, like, if I was to start a sexual relationship with someone and they were like, "Oh, well, I don't get tested or I don't have to get tested." To me, red flag, because
Yeah.
if you've never been tested, then how do you know for sure? Cuz like syphilis or HIV has a like can go un with
Yeah.
no symptoms for years, correct?
Right. Because HIV, the symptoms for HIV are flu like.
Mhm.
And who goes to the doctor with flu like symptoms and they've ruled out COVID and strep and flu, and they're like, oh, well, I don't
And
know. You must
I
not got nothing. Bye bye.
I have fatigue all the time. So like when I look at anything, I'm like, well, goodness, everything I look at, every illness or disease, fatigue is
Right.
like a symptom.
Yeah,
So now,
exactly.
I will say when I was younger, having that conversation would have been hard because
Yes.
you don't want someone not to like you and that. But I wish I could just tell my younger self, like, at the end of the day, protect yourself
Yeah.
because prevention is so much easier than having to worry, what comes with.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important. Like, I always use the example, if they ask for a nude, then let's talk about sex. And if they don't want to talk about sex, then that just lets you know that maybe you don't need to deal with that person, because
Mhm.
if you want to have sex with me, we need to be able to talk about sex. And if we can't talk about sex, then we don't need to be having sex. I really encourage the young people, you know, set your boundaries, set your expectations. This is what I'm not going to do. This is what I am going to do. Like, whatever. And be firm in that, and things would be a little bit easier.
It's to me, it blows my mind sometimes when someone can so easily ask for a nude or send a nude, but then if you bring up wanting to make sure you're not just safe for yourself, but safe for your partner, because that person
Right.
doesn't know who you've been with. It's like,
Exactly.
oh, like we kind of get a
Yeah.
little, it makes it awkward.
Um, and maybe you're not ready to have sex if you can't talk about it. So those are just some things I think about. It's definitely what I tell my kids because I still have two little ones at the house. They're not little, but they're teenagers. But we have these conversations like, hey, if they don't want to talk about it, then maybe you don't need to deal with them.
Well, and there's no shame. Like if you happen to test positive for an STI or that, there's no shame in it. And then if you're interested in learning about prep or that, we have a great
Mhm.
prep team that will help answer your questions, get you started. And Q Care, that's a great thing. That's I'm on Q Care, and I love that every 3 months they send me a test kit. I do that. I get my samples, and then I just put it back right back in the mail.
Yeah,
And it's as easy.
I
I don't have
like
to leave
Q
my
Care
house.
too. Yeah, and Q Care will do the anal and oral swabs.
Mhm.
So I really push people to go that way. Um, especially if you're want to get on prep or PEP, is to definitely do that because then you can swab all the areas and they'll provide treatment. So
Mhm.
that's really good. But if you test with us outside of Q Care and you do test reactive for one of these, then I'm going to get you hooked up. We're going to take care of you, even make sure you get to the doctor, whatever we need to do to help you get treatment and get cured from one of the ones you can and get managed with the other one with HIV. So, because we want people to live long, healthy lives.
And that's one thing too, like when especially when it comes to HIV, the sooner you know, the sooner you can get to U equals U, and then you get you're undetectable.
And one more thing about as far as like having discussions, if you do have a STI or a STD, you are required to disclose that information before having sex with somebody. So why not just talk about it all together?
If you think talking to someone beforehand about getting tested or prevention is awkward, the call that you have to make when you find out that you tested positive for chlamydia or gonorrhea is, I will tell you, more awkward.
It is, and it can get kind of nasty, a blame game or
Mhm.
whatever. But if you get regular testing, you can say, "Hey, I got tested 3 months ago. I didn't have it then." And you can kind of have those conversations with syphilis, HIV. Those are required to be reported to the health department. Disease intervention specialists will contact you and they can make some of those calls for you so you don't have to in those situations. But if you did go into it that way, ADH is going to know that, the Department of Health is going to know that. So you just want to go ahead and put it all out there to begin with, and you got nothing to
Mhm.
worry about.
And remember, if you want to get tested, you just go to EAC's website, you fill out the form, you could get tested today or schedule a future appointment. We also, for HIV, we have at home tests that are sent to you for free. So you don't have to worry about coming into the office. We will just send that right to you. And if you just want to learn some more information about STIs, talk to one of our team members. Andrea or one of our friendly staff members will love to help you and talk to you. No
Yeah.
judgment, stigma free, just a safe environment to learn.
Yeah, you can call or text me. My number's on the website.
So, all right. So that is all I have for you today. And I just want to thank you again, Andrea, for coming and talking to us.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy it.
And we will talk to you next time. Bye.